So thank you, everybody, for inviting me to give a talk. I wish I could see you directly. It's always much easier to give a talk when you can see the people, but I can't. And I've never been to Brazil, as much as it would be wonderful to go. I know where it is on the map, and I've heard a lot about it. So, I'm really hoping that what I say makes some sense to you. I don't speak any Portuguese, I'm very sorry. So I'll just speak in English, which is difficult enough to speak and to make myself understood. So I always like to start talks with just a moment of, closing your eyes and breathing, watching your breath as it goes in and out. And just letting your mind and body relax. And again, before we start the talk, we always cultivate our motivation. Why are we here doing this? So we may have come with one or another motivation, but at this time we actively cultivate a motivation of compassion. And one way to do this is to think that everybody is just like me in wanting happiness and not suffering. And that's true for the people that are my friends and relatives. It's true for people who are strangers. And it's also true for people I don't get along with, or people who threaten me. Everybody is just trying to be happy and avoid suffering. So if we look at the world in that way, then we have to say, if everybody wants happiness, everybody wants suffering equally, then there's no reason why I should just care about my own happiness and put others aside and think, oh, they're not me, they don't count, they don't matter. Because we're all the same in that way. So as we think about that more, then we can reach the conclusion that since suffering of any kind belonging to whatever living being is something undesirable, then let's all do what we can to eliminate it. And if there is something good, some happiness to be had, then instead of just favoring myself and the people I like, since everybody wants happiness, then what can I do to bring happiness to others? Doesn't matter whether they're friends, whether they're strangers, whether they're enemies. What can I do to contribute to their welfare? And so with that kind of motivation, then we'll proceed with the talk. Okay, so what is compassion and how does it fit into our lives? So the Buddha's definition of compassion is very short and simple. It's the wish for living beings to be free of pain and misery. Love is the wish for living beings to have happiness and its causes. So you can see that the compassion wanting to eliminate suffering and its causes, and love bringing happiness and its causes, they complement each other very well. And as I did in the motivation, we try to cultivate these for all living beings, no matter who they are, how they treat us. Yeah. In other words, there aren't any criteria for caring about others. Like, you have to agree with my political values, you have to say nice things about me, you have to give me presents. If you do all these things, then you're an object of my love and compassion. Yeah. If you do the opposite, you point out my faults, yeah, you ignore me, you just talk about me behind my back, or you even hit me, forget it. I don't want you to have happiness. You can have suffering for all I care. So we have that really kind of vengeful tendency, which is not very nice, and it's also the source of a lot of conflict and pain in our society. So compassion, it's often not understood well, yeah, and we often think, we think of Jesus when we think of compassion. And Jesus was so compassionate that what did he do? He was crucified, he hung on a cross, okay? And then, but that's not exactly how Buddhism looks at compassion. Because sometimes when we have that image of Jesus on the cross, then we get the idea, and it's a wrong idea, that to be truly compassionate, we have to suffer. And if we don't suffer, we're not really compassionate. Okay. That does not fall into the Buddhist description of compassion, yeah? Because in Buddhism, we also want ourselves to be free of suffering and its causes. We also want ourselves to have happiness and its causes. There's nothing wrong with those. The problem comes when we care about our own welfare more than others, because that's when we beat them to get rid of them. That's where we, bribe them to be on our side. That's when we lie. That's when we steal, and so on. Okay? So we try and just based on what I said at the beginning, everybody wants happiness and its causes. Everybody wants to be free of suffering and its causes. And there's no difference between us. Yeah, even talking about animals. Yeah, can you imagine? Even talking about bugs. Yeah, a mosquito that lands on you, Oh, we usually think, ooh, yeah. But just think, what would it be like to be a mosquito? And you're just flying around all day, hungry, looking for something to eat. And that's all you want is something to eat to stop your hunger. Okay? So mosquitoes and us, we're alike in that respect, yeah? And so needless to say, other human beings and we are alike in that respect, yeah? So we try and open our heart to one that really cares about all beings. sometimes we say, but what about caring for myself? Yeah, well, yeah, that's good. We should care about ourselves, but in the proper way. Caring about ourselves doesn't mean we indulge ourselves in all of our cravings and our desires and so on. It means we keep our body healthy, and clean. We keep our mind fresh and alert. And we have an idea of what we can do to contribute to the well-being of others. So I think most of you listening are teachers. Wow, you contribute a lot to the well-being of others. Yeah, and the children often, some children appreciate it and they recognize it. Some children don't, I loved school when I was little, but did I think of my teachers as giving me life skills I would appreciate for the rest of my life? No. Yeah, but being an adult now and saying, oh, I can read and write. And that was Mrs. Richardson in first grade, Mrs. Ducommun in second grade, and so on, people who taught me and how indebted I am to them. So the thing I think that brings us a lot of fulfillment as teachers is, not the end of the school year where we're off, but, what brings fulfillment is when you see a child kind of going, oh, and learning something new, yeah, or because as teachers, you're also teaching them values. You're teaching them how to be a kind person. And so when you see a child, slowly changing their behavior for the best, you feel really happy because you can see that you contributed something. Sometimes, of course, people's behavior doesn't change for many years after that, but still knowing that maybe, we said something that influenced them in a positive way, and even though they didn't kind of get it until later, then still, that's something valuable. And having been a teacher myself before becoming a Buddhist nun, yeah, I knew that teaching was something good that could make a really good impression on somebody. And I began to see as a teacher that with some children, all it takes is one adult that believes in them. And that one adult, following them and taking care and asking them questions and listening to them and giving them feedback when they need feedback about their behavior. But just the fact of one adult caring about them in a very close, loving way like that, for many kids, that's all they need. Yeah? And that's what they really need. Nothing else really will substitute it. When you're a teacher in a classroom, I don't know how big your classrooms are. Ours range from 25 to 35 students. That's a lot of kids. Of course, it depends on the age. You like to think as they get older, it's better, but not always. Teenage years is kind of difficult for teachers and for the students. But watching them grow and watching them discover what their own unique talents and abilities, and so that they can contribute to society, it's very rewarding to see that. And you might say, but these kids, teach them how to contribute to society, teach them to be good citizens, teach them to be good human beings. You know, I don't know about in Brazil, but here we have government tests that we give kids, and they gotta pass those tests. I think there's a way to teach reading, writing, and arithmetic, as they say, and teach how to be a good person, because that is going to be much more important, I think. Because somebody could learn skills, but if they don't have good values as a human being, they will destroy the happiness of others. Yeah. Whereas even if kids have to use the spell check on the computer because they can't spell things properly, that's okay if they have good values and they treat others with kindness. They'll have a much better life that way. Yeah. And I think that you can also teach things like reading and doing research and this kind of stuff when you teach values, when you teach how to communicate. Communication skills are very important for kids. Yeah. When you teach them how to resolve conflicts. Yeah, conflict resolution skills. These are things that at least in the US, they usually don't have classes for. You know, maybe in college you run into a few, but it's mostly extracurricular and you have to learn on your own or some other kind of course, but not in school. But I think this is one of the deficiencies in the school system, at least in my country, is that they don't teach kids good values, conflict resolution, communication. Yeah. They used to have a category called citizenship, and that was basically, you know, whether the teacher had to scold you a lot or not. Yeah, and you got your grade in citizenship based on, you know, based on that. But you know, it wasn't really teaching how to be a good citizen. Yeah, how to respect laws, how to respect other people that you live with, you know, or share the country with. So all this is so important for having people who are psychologically healthy and for having a society that is harmonious. Yeah, because I think both of our countries have had a lot of upheavals politically in recent years, and none of that is fun. It's much better when we can do what we can to contribute to peace. Now, the question I brought up a few minutes ago was, what about my happiness? You know, am I just slaving away all day to take care of others? Because I know some of you are teachers, are probably single mothers, maybe a few single fathers, and you're working to, you know, get enough money to put food on the table, and then you have to go home and your kids have their own things going on and you have to take care of them, and you know, at the end of the day you're saying, you know, what about me? Yeah. Again, it depends a lot on our values and how we look at things. And if we have a sense of purpose, a sense of fulfillment from giving to others, then giving to others becomes its own reward and we feel fulfilled, we feel happy about it afterwards. So His Holiness the Dalai Lama always says, if you want to be selfish, be wisely selfish and take care of others. What's he talking about? Huh? If I want to be wisely selfish, I should take care of others. That's what I've been doing, and I'm exhausted. Yeah. The reason you're exhausted is, we have to learn to balance ourselves physically, but we have to really take care of our motivation. And if we wake up every morning and think, wow, I have the ability to contribute something positive to the lives of others. Wow, can you think of anything better than that you want to do? What is going to make you feel better about yourself and better about your life? Lying on the beach all day, or doing something where you can see, wow, it really affected somebody in a good way. What makes you feel more about, better about yourself? So, caring for others with a good motivation, caring for others, but saying, oh God, I just don't want to. Oh, those children, I'm fed up with them, they don't listen, but I gotta go to work. If you go to work like that, you're not gonna have a good day. Yeah. So we have to, at the very beginning of the day, really check our motivation and think, well, how fortunate I am to have the opportunity to do my part in creating a harmonious society by educating kids. Yeah, that is something that is really, really valuable. Mm-hmm. So this one, His Holiness says, when we help others, we feel better about ourselves. If we start out with a good motivation, do the action, rejoice in it afterwards. So there's a sense of personal fulfillment, but also when we contribute to the welfare of others, then we're going to live with people who are happy. Whereas when we lack compassion, and instead, when we experience harm or when somebody does something we don't like, we want revenge, and we plan our revenge and how we're going to get even and give them a taste of their own medicine so they stop bothering me. First of all, how do we feel about ourselves? Being a person who rejoices at others' suffering. I don't think we feel so good about ourselves. Second of all, if we harm others, if we don't keep good ethical conduct and we harm others, then we're going to live in a community where people don't like us. And where people are not going to care about us. Mm-hmm. So, if we want to be happy now, we want to live with people who are happy. Because if we live among people who are miserable, who are poor, who are uneducated, who come from, families where they're unable to take care of their kids properly, then we're going to live, in a society with unhappy people. Are unhappy people going to be content with their unhappiness and say, oh, I'm so glad you feel good? No. This is what causes so much disharmony in society. The wealth gap, not just physical wealth, but opportunities, the gap in opportunities can create so much discord, Yeah, because some people are favored, other people are disfavored. The people who are not favored, then they're resentful. Yeah, just to give you an example, when I lived in Seattle, there was a voter issue about whether to raise property taxes for the schools because they wanted to, increase resources at schools. And a lot of people who either their children were grown up or they didn't have children, then they were saying, oh, why should I, pay for other kids' education? I worked hard in my life. I have a nice house. Everything is good in my life. I make a good living. I can get whatever I want. Why should I care about other people's kids? They're not my kids. Yeah. And I thought, okay, let's say you have that attitude. You don't care about other people's kids. Yeah. Because you don't want to give up any of your money in extra taxes for the schools that educate other people's kids. Then what's going to happen? What are children going to do when they don't have a good education or when there's not after-school activities? My guess is probably in Brazil and the US, what kids do is about the same. They hang out on the streets. Yeah, maybe they get into drugs, and then they need money, if not for drugs, then for computer games or whatever else, and they don't have money. So whose houses are they going to break into? Whose cars are they going to break into? The houses and cars of the people who were more wealthy, who didn't want to vote for increased taxes for schools. So you can see that when you think, oh, I'm going to keep it for myself, I'm not paying it in taxes, that'll benefit me. Actually, it turns around and harms you because you're living with people who don't have equal opportunity and equal resources. Yeah? So compassion involves really caring about this, caring about our own happiness, others' happiness, and seeing that because we're all interconnected, it's actually quite difficult just to think, oh, I care about myself and my dear ones and nobody else, because we're going to be affected by other people in our society. If they're miserable, they're going to be doing things that, we're not going to be happy with. And we wouldn't actually blame them because we know that if we were impoverished like that, or if we were denied opportunities like that, we would probably act in the same way. Yeah. So if you want to be selfish, be wisely selfish and take care of others. Yeah. It's good advice. Then the question comes, but, I love this. People say, oh yes, that sounds good, but, I'm sure as teachers you all know this when you ask children about different things, or just people in general, yes, but, yeah. So then the question comes, but some people, they're obnoxious, I don't like them, they're rude, they lie, they take my stuff, they do this, they do that. How am I supposed to like them and work for their benefit or have compassion? They don't deserve any kindness. Look at their behavior, and we even say, oh, throw them in prison, lock them up, throw away the key, or send them to the principal office and let the principal whack them, something like that. Ugh, I don't like those people. Here, the thing is to look at our anger. Yeah, in Buddhism, we see anger as a defilement, as something that, first of all, is based on an erroneous outlook, an erroneous interpretation of the situation, and exaggerating things. Yeah. And it's very interesting when we get angry at something, when you really study your own anger. Don't study other people's anger. You've already done that. Yeah. Yeah. I love when people come to my talks when I'm talking about working with anger, and, a husband and wife are sitting next to each other, and one elbows the other and says, "Dear, she's talking about anger. You should listen." No, we're not talking about others' anger. We're talking about our own anger, okay? And from a Buddhist viewpoint, we say anger is an attitude that is based on exaggerating the bad qualities of someone or something, or projecting bad qualities that aren't there. And then, because of this exaggerated way of thinking about somebody, we have the fight or flight response. So we either want to attack them verbally or physically, or we want to run away and get away from them, okay? So in our way of analysis of anger, we start with the interpretation of the events, because we always have a story that precedes our emotions. And very often we are not aware of that, what that story is. And so we automatically assume that it's true, that it's accurate, and that any reasonable person would see the situation like us, and any reasonable person would have the same anger and resentment and wish for revenge that we do. Okay, but it's all based on this wrong interpretation, okay? So sometimes small things may happen and we misunderstand them, and so we project a motivation on somebody, thinking that, yes, this is why they're doing that, and they deliberately would deliberately want to hurt me, and we project that on, but we never stop and ask the person and check with the person, did you do this? Why did you do this? What is it that you really want to say through this action? Yeah. We never stop to really check our own interpretation. Okay? So, and it can go with small things, like somebody doesn't say good morning to you. Yeah, usually they say good morning, and one day they don't say good morning, their head's down, and and you go, uh-oh, what did I do wrong? They're not saying good morning. They don't like me. I must have done something wrong. But I didn't do anything wrong. This person is always so disagreeable, so unfriendly. Yeah, I didn't do anything wrong, and they can't even say good morning. Oh my goodness. Yeah, and you get really angry. Okay. Now, and you're imputing, they don't like me, they're rude, they're not courteous, they don't care about any human beings, they act like that towards everybody. Do you see how you're building up the story? Yeah, it starts on them not saying good morning, and then pretty soon, we even say, oh, they're passive aggressive, they must have bipolar disease or something. We start to psychoanalyze them even though we aren't therapists. Yeah. But we don't know if our initial thought was correct or not. Maybe they had a stomach ache, and that was why they didn't say good morning. Yeah. Maybe they had something else going on in their lives that they really had to think about and sort out, and so they were preoccupied. In other words, it had nothing to do with me. It had to do with, how they were choosing to spend their time because of what was going on in their lives. Yeah. So why am I taking everything so personally as a personal insult, a personal rejection? Yeah. Okay. So that way you can calm yourself a little bit. Then the yes, but mind comes again. And it says, yes, but, yeah, I know this person doesn't like me. Yeah, I know it. And I can't stand it. Yeah. Okay, so first of all, how do you know it? Second of all, if they don't like me, is that a national disaster? Yeah. Does anybody else in the country care that this person doesn't like me and doesn't say good morning to me or whatever it is? No. Let's say it was a really serious situation. Yeah. You were working together with someone and then they, for some reason just cut things off and left you hanging, and, your project was undone and you had to scuttle, around yourself to finish it. It was very inconvenient. And you get into the thing, well, they don't like me. Okay. Yeah, so therefore I don't like them. That's really a good logical argument, isn't it? Yeah, they don't like me, so I don't like them. Yeah, that's that very good use of logic. Yeah, that goes along with, they threw sand at me, and your advice is, well, throw sand back. Yes, that's really helpful, isn't it? Yeah. So, to really say, okay, first of all, I don't know if that they don't like me or that they want to sabotage my project or whatever it is. But first of all, I don't know that. But second, even if they didn't like me, why do I have to have a bad attitude in return to them? It's a free world. People can have their own opinion of me. Some people are going to like me and some people aren't going to like me. And that's fine. Yeah. And then there's one thought that comes up. But I have a rule of the universe, that says everybody has to like me. And it is totally unsatisfactory that one person doesn't like me. Yeah. So if they don't like me, I won't like them and I'll treat them mean. And if I treat them mean enough, then they'll decide to like me. Huh? that is even more unreasonable and illogical. Isn't it? You know, I'll punish somebody, they don't like me. Okay. So who suffers when we do that? Not the other person, we do. Okay. And it's not a huge, just somebody doesn't like us, doesn't mean that, first of all, it doesn't mean they're gonna not like us forever and ever and ever and ever. Yeah. Second of all, actually, we worry so much. Oh, they don't like me. And, what happens to my reputation? They're going to talk to other people about how bad I am. But actually, you know what? Let me tell you. When people don't like us, they're not spending all day thinking about how they don't like us. Yeah. They aren't repeating like a mantra, I don't like children. I don't like children. I don't like children. I don't like children. They even take out their prayer books, prayer beads, and count them. I don't like children. I don't like children. I don't like. You think somebody does that? No. They are too busy thinking about their own lives. They're not going to pay that much attention to us, okay? And it's really quite interesting when, in those situations, if we make an effort to smile at somebody, to stop and chat with them for a minute, yeah, to clean up the coffee counter at work, even though nobody asked us to. Oh my God, it's somebody else's job and they're not doing it. Why should I do it? Well, why not? Somebody needs to do it. It'll make everybody in the workplace happy. And, you reach out, you do something nice for other people. And then the people who you thought didn't like you, they're going to change their ideas and their opinions. And even if they continue not to like you, really, it's okay, it's a free world. We can still care about them. Yeah. Now, we often, when we're angry, instead of caring about others, we want to cause them more suffering. But causing them more suffering isn't going to make them happy. It's going to make them more unhappy, and then we live around unhappy people longer. Okay? So I'm making the argument, that caring for others is a way of caring for ourselves, and it creates well-being among communities and workplaces and a family. Yeah. At one large gathering, I once gave myself it was a 3-month gathering with teachings and so on. And I said, there were about 200, 300 people there. And I said to myself, during these 3 months, I'm going to make an effort to have at least a good, one good conversation with everybody there. And there's all different kinds of people there. And so I gave myself that assignment, and I did it, and I was so surprised at the result, because there were many people who had very different views than I did. But if I asked them questions and got to know them a little bit, I always found something that we were both interested in, or something where we have similar ideas, where we could actually have a good conversation. Yeah. So, making the effort to reach out and do that has a lot of benefits. Okay? So compassion, yeah, doesn't mean that we let everybody do whatever they want. Okay? Yeah. I often give the example of somebody who gets beaten at home, you know, and they say, oh, you beat me yesterday. Oh, but you're my relative, so I forgive you. You beat me yesterday. You can beat me today. It's okay. No, that's not okay. Okay? So compassion doesn't mean, oh, I have so much compassion that whatever you do is okay. I forgive you. You know, that's not compassion. I think we have to hold people accountable for their actions. Yeah. Accountable doesn't mean that we prosecute them and, have a judge and jury and everything. But we, especially with children, to teach them to own whatever actions they did and then to reflect on the value of their actions, yeah? Is that an action that really brought about what I wanted? Or did it bring about the opposite of what I actually wanted? Okay? So compassion doesn't mean, that some kid is just enraged and he's beating on the other kids and you just say, oh, just have compassion for him. No, he's beating on other kids and harming them. You have to go in there and break it up and, get everybody calmed down. Yeah. And then the compassion part comes in where you have to, talk to the child. And you have to get them calm enough first where they can hear and then see what's going on. Yeah, why they're acting like that. In my years of teachings, there's one situation that really is very strong in my mind that I have some regret over. I was teaching third grade. So third grade, they're about 9 years old. Yeah, it's a nice age. They're usually very nice at around 9 in third grade. Anyway, there was one little boy named David there, and he was a very bright kid, and he was usually quite okay to get along with. He wasn't acting out or whatever. And so things were going along fine for, a certain period in the school year. And then he started being very uncooperative. He started being very angry with other children. Something was going on. He didn't want to cooperate with anybody. He was just belligerent. And one day, we were standing near a cupboard, and he just took the cupboard door and pushed it so that it whacked me in the face. And I thought, okay, this is it. We're going to the principal's office. And I took him to the principal. I don't like taking kids to the principal. And what I learned later, I don't know what the principal did, because that behavior certainly is not acceptable behavior. But what I learned later, and I think the principal got this out, is he called the parents in, and David's parents were getting divorced. Yeah, so he's 9 years old, and the security of his family is splintering. And he loves both of his parents. Who's he going to live with? Where is he going to live? And mom and dad are just not very nice to each other nowadays, and that's affecting the kids. And, I went, oh my God, what I should have done earlier, before him slamming the cupboard door in my face, was I should have sat him down and said, David, what's going on? You seem really unhappy and angry these days. What's happening at home? And I'm sure he would have told me. And that would have probably eased a lot of things for him, because he was holding all of that in, and all of the fear, that happens when parents divorce. So, compassion, you do those kind of things because you care about people, yeah, and it's not saying like what his behavior acting out. It wasn't saying, oh, that behavior's okay, no problem. It was, okay, what was he? Why did he act like that? He was screaming for help. Yeah, and at 9 years old, he didn't know how to say, I need help, my family's falling apart, I'm scared. Yeah, so to learn to read these things in other people, yeah, and maybe that can prevent some of the acting out that kids have. There's another technique that I learned. I don't know if I should say this one. It involves using swear words. Do I have your permission? Really? A nun using swear words? Okay, but this is really good. So somebody was telling me they were a high school teacher. Okay, we all know high school, teenage years. Yeah, the kids' hormones are changing, everything, they're changing, they're so, consumed with how they look and who likes them and all this kind of stuff. And also they can be very, very angry at authority in teenage years because they are, making that transition to adulthood and like, don't tell me what to do kind of attitude, yeah? So this woman was a teacher in an inner city area. It's an area where usually minorities lived, and that was usually impoverished. So she was there, and it wasn't very long into the school year, just a few days. And so she's doing her the class, and there's some kid who just, is doing whatever he can to irritate the teacher. Okay? You know, those of you who are teachers, you know that. Yeah. Whatever I can do to like, okay. So the teacher kind of, says, please behave, stop doing that. And the kid says, yeah, don't tell me what to do, you motherfucking bitch. That's not good English, by the way. I don't know. Just with this line, don't tell me what to do, you motherfucking bitch. So the kid is, she's a teacher. He's in the back row. So she's just calm. And she walks to the back row, and she leans over to talk to the kid. And she says, I might be a bitch, but I don't fuck my mother. And that kid was like, yeah. What she said was so unexpected that he was shocked, Yeah. And his behavior changed after that, you know. He knew that his teacher wasn't some goody-goody, that she knew how to use street language, okay? And that she wasn't afraid of it. And that she had a sense of humor. Mm-hmm. So, there, you know, that's speaking on the level of techniques, you know, but our talk is based on talking about compassion. Compassion is your inner attitude, but it comes out in terms of how you speak, how you act, and so on. Yeah. So that's what we're getting towards. Okay, so I just want to say I'm very glad that all of you are teachers and helping so many kids. The sponsors wrote and told us about what the federal school system does in Brazil. You know, that there's no fees to go to school, and that they can have food and sometimes even bus money, and that's fantastic, you know, as much as we can do to make education available, and also to make education fun, okay? So I was doing my teacher training in an area where they were advocating open classrooms. And this is only good for certain kind of kids, you know. And it's a system where the teacher sets up little centers, learning centers in the classrooms, and where kids can go and learn about a certain topic. And in learning about that topic, they're also learning about reading and you know, recall of what they're reading and understanding, and sometimes math, and, you know. And so it's a system, like a set of centers. And then the kids, you often have kids who are, you know, some are within 1 or 2 years difference of each other, but not necessarily the same grade. Sometimes kids who are a little bit older, so the kids work together. And that's really nice sometimes for the older kids to do. But when I tried to do this in the inner city, it didn't work. Yeah, because the kids there were used to adults being very setting rules and setting boundaries, and you must behave like that, so that they had lots of things that they could rebel against. Yeah, but just leaving it, the open learning centers didn't work with them. So, you know, being a teacher, you have to see what works with what kind of kid, depending on their how they've been raised, what they know, their different abilities, and so on. So really seeing everybody as an individual and relating to them according to their being an individual. Yeah. Because one size doesn't fit all. Okay, so I think we've come to a conclusion, hopefully, or an end. And there's much more to say about compassion, much more to learn, but I think the other speakers will do that. And any of you who want to come visit us in the US, we're in Washington State. Just drive up the west side of South America, Central America, North America, and before you get to the Canadian border, then you'll find us. Okay, so thank you very much for everything you're doing for your students, for all your colleagues at schools. Yeah, it can be a tough job, but it's also an important one and a very rewarding one.